When Israel launched its widespread missile attack on Iran, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed it was preemptive, saying that Iran had a secret program to build a nuclear bomb.
And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year.
That's despite US intelligence and the UN's nuclear watchdog previously finding no evidence Iran had begun to assemble a nuclear weapon. But experts have warned that these attacks by both Israel and the US, which were unprovoked and contravene international law, may motivate Iran to do so. And all of this has put the spectre of nuclear war front of mind around the world once again. As Damien Gale recently reported, there are currently 4,000 nuclear weapons poised for a first strike across the Northern Hemisphere, with enough atomic firepower to kill as many as 700 million people just from the initial blasts and burning alone. So it's probably worth going over which countries actually have these nuclear weapons. There's 9 in total, plus one country who had them but then gave them up, and a couple of almost nuclear states who aren't actively looking to get a nuke, but theoretically have the ability to build one reasonably quickly if they so wished. The main international law controlling access to nukes is the UN's Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which states that the only countries legally allowed to have them are Russia, the United States, China, France, and the United Kingdom. Basically all the big victors of World War II. But a treaty is only legally binding if you actually agree to be part of it, which brings us to the next 2 countries who never signed on that dotted line. India, getting them in 1974, followed by Pakistan in 1998. Interestingly, this means that the short-lived Kargil War of 1999 is actually the only time 2 nuclear-capable countries have ever engaged in large-scale warfare, and no nukes were used. You've probably already guessed number 8, North Korea. It withdrew from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2003, the first and only country to ever do so. And by 2017, it had developed the ability to attach a nuclear warhead to a long-range missile. The final country is a little more complicated because it's never formally acknowledged that it has nuclear weapons, but it's been an open secret for decades. Israel. It's believed that Israel developed their nuclear weapons in the 1950s and 60s. Now, that's before the UN treaty was ratified, and Israel never actually signed it anyway, so technically this wasn't illegal, but still, it was done covertly, and Israel was helped by several countries that would later go on to become vocal campaigners for non-proliferation. This includes France, who openly helped Israel build a nuclear power reactor, and then secretly also helped them build a plutonium reprocessing plant required for weapons. And we have the UK and Norway, who, at least according to top secret documents revealed by the BBC, collaborated in 1959 to sell Israel 20 tons of heavy water, which is a key ingredient for making nuclear weapons. Israel now has an estimated 90 warheads, but despite being aware of this for decades, global powers like the US generally don't challenge Israel's policy of opacity, where they simply refuse to publicly confirm or deny if they have nukes. But they have admitted it privately. In 2010, The Guardian obtained documents revealing that Israel actually offered to sell nuclear weapons to South Africa in the 1970s, although the sale never actually took place. Speaking of South Africa though, they're the only country in history to develop nuclear weapons and then later get rid of them. During the apartheid era, South Africa developed a small nuclear arsenal, believing that having those would mean the US would have no choice but to intervene and help South Africa were they to get into a skirmish with any of the neighbouring Soviet-aligned states. But of course, political climates change, and in the 90s, as the Cold War and apartheid ended, and South Africa generally looked to better integrate into the global community, it made the decision to dismantle and destroy all 6 of its warheads and join the UN's Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This brings us to the almost nuclear countries. Japan, for example, has a highly developed nuclear power infrastructure, and it's been speculated that if they so chose, they could construct a weapon within about a year. But to be clear, there is no indication that Japan wants to do this. Not only are they party to the UN's nuclear treaty, but they've also been a leading voice in nuclear disarmament, which makes sense given they are the only country to have ever directly experienced the devastation that these weapons can bring. Plus, it helps that the US has promised Japan, as well as South Korea, Australia and the other NATO countries, that it will use its nukes to defend them against nuclear attacks by other countries. So Japan doesn't really need its own. So what about Iran? They also have advanced nuclear power systems, but are they on the brink of creating weapons as Israel claims? Well, a report from the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the UN's nuclear watchdog, did warn that Iran hasn't been entirely cooperative with international inspectors, and they've accumulated an unprecedented stockpile of enriched uranium in recent years. However, the report concluded that there was still no credible indication that Iran was actively pursuing nuclear weapons, and United States intelligence agrees.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003.
The director of that UN agency, Rafael Grossi, has said that if it wanted to, Iran could potentially build a nuclear weapon in a matter of months, not years. This was part of the justification for both the Israeli and the US strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. We don't really know how significant that damage was just yet, or how much it's delayed Iran's notional nuclear timeline. But as we've seen from South Africa and Japan, whether a country can build nukes and whether they will build them are very different questions.